Welcome, everybody, to this program, Healing a Broken Agricultural System. Tonight, we're going to hear about how it's necessary to transform our failed system of food production into one that's regenerative, sustainable, and non-exploitative. We'll hear how climate is an essential component of relationships between plants, animals, and the rest of the living world. We'll hear about how India, with its ecologies in tatters, sees the urgency to work on species restoration and rehabilitation, and how urban farming in the St. Louis area shows the possibility of decolonizing agriculture while challenging white privilege. I'm not a tough guy, but we do have a system here under which we're going to let all speakers and commenters and questioners know when the time is up. So I apologize in advance for interrupting you when that happens. Okay, our first speaker is John Ikerd, Professor Emeritus of Agricultural Economics, College of Agriculture, Food, and Natural Resources at the University of Missouri, Columbia. He's devoted his recent professional time to speaking and writing about agricultural and economic sustainability. So thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight. I want to express my thanks to the organizers of the conference. Now, I'm looking forward to hearing what the other panel members have to say. Let me begin by saying that, in my opinion, from my perspective, the problem that we're talking about tonight is not agriculture itself, but it's the kind of agriculture that we've chosen to adopt here in the United States and in much of the rest of the world, particularly over the last 100 years or so. I think we need to recognize that every living species within nature attempts to alter its natural environment in order to favor itself relative to the other species. And that's basically what we're doing with agriculture. We see this within nature, whether we're talking about ants that build ant hills or beavers that build dams or gophers and groundhogs that build holes in the ground. But within healthy natural ecosystems, the interdependent relationships among all of those species keep individual species within check. Even if you look at human populations, go back to indigenous people, they basically all practice some form of agriculture. I shouldn't say all, but many human populations kept forms of agriculture. They altered the landscape in some way to favor themselves relative to the other species. Even when they didn't cultivate land, they would encourage specific species of plants and animals by doing things to the environment that gave favor to those species relative to the other species they competed with. When they raised livestock or they harvested wild game and things of this nature, they timed their harvest and they did it in such a way that favored the particular species that they used for food. And even when they cultivated the land, the indigenous people moved about from place to place, like in slash and burn agriculture. So whatever damage or degradation they did to the productivity of the natural environment in order to produce their food, then they gave nature an opportunity to repair that damage and to restore the natural productivity before they come back and use that land again. It was a regenerative kind of agriculture. The problem came about whenever human settlements grow in terms of population, so it began to put pressure on productivity to support the larger populations. But even in those situations, even in North and South America, for example, there were populations of indigenous people, such as the Cahokia people, settlements that across there from St. Louis, where you had large populations of 20 to 40,000 people in a particular place. And they basically relied on like corn, squash, and beans, which were complementary to each other, continue to regenerate the soil. But the problem came about whenever the pressure came to such a point that they would depend upon an extractive rather than a generative form of agriculture. That you begin to extract the productivity of the land and from people more quickly than nature was able to regenerate it. All productivity, everything that's of any use to human beings ultimately comes from the earth, from the air, the water, the minerals, from the sun. All of the earth's natural ecosystem is what supports humanity. And so all productivity comes from there, and beyond self-sufficiency becomes by way of nature. And so this extractive kind of agriculture that I call industrial agriculture, specialized, standardized, consolidate, is very efficient in extracting the value from natural resources, from nature, by way of society. But it has nothing in it, and there's no incentive within this industrial approach to agriculture to regenerate and renew the productivity that's inevitably used up or depleted in the process of production. Even today, as you look at it, I think the main problem is we have this blind faith in human creativity and imagination and in the technology that we can create. We function with this blind faith in this belief that we as humans are smart enough, intelligent enough, creative enough to solve any problem that we create and to find a replacement for any resource that we ultimately might deplete. And that's accompanied by a blind faith in the market economic system, where we say if resources become sufficiently scarce, if we degrade them to the point where they're scarce, then they become more economically valuable as they become more scarce. And the economic value will create economic incentives, and we will simply then automatically find a substitute for anything we use up and solve any problem that we might create. Industrial agriculture that I'm talking about here is a broken system. It's not ecologically, socially, or economically sustainable over the long run. It can't be fixed. We have to replace it. That's my perspective. That's my truth. You may differ, but that's what I feel. We have to replace this industrial agriculture with a regenerative, resilient, resourceful kind of agriculture that functions in harmony with nature and respects the bounds of nature. I think in order to make the kind of fundamental systemic change that I'm talking about here, you have to have three conditions in place. We're making progress in the first. I think the first is that people have to conclude that the current system, what we're doing now, is not working, and it's not going to work in the future because it's not sustainable. We see a growing public realization of the problems in the industrial agricultural system. We see the ecological problems, and we mentioned about the problems of climate change have risen to the forefront, but for a long time, we've known the problems of environmental pollution and degradation associated with reliance on synthetic pesticides and chemical fertilizers. Let me start with the second part. I started off saying that the industrial agriculture is a broken system, that it basically can't be fixed, that we have to replace it instead of fix it. We have to replace this industrial, extractive, exploitive system with a regenerate, resilient, resourceful system that functions in harmony with nature. And I said there's three basic conditions that we have to have in place for large systemic change that I'm talking about here. The first of those is we must conclude that the current system that we have, the industrial agricultural system, agri-food system, isn't working, and it's not going to work in the future because it's not sustainable. And I think we're coming to a broader public realization of this. We've been talking a long time about the environmental and natural resource problems associated with industrial agriculture. The latest concern is about its contribution to global climate change, which threatens the future of humanity on the planet. But we've known for a long time about the use of synthetic pesticides, commercial fertilizers, and the large-scale confinement animal feeding operations that pollute the air and the water and the natural environment with agricultural, chemical, and biological waste that threatens the public health of the country and the people of the country. We've also becoming increasingly aware of the social problems, and we've got a higher level of food insecurity today than we had in the last phase of this industrialization started in the 1960s, with about 1 out of 7 children in this country, in the United States, classified as hungry or food insecure. We've got an epidemic of obesity and diabetes and high blood pressure, heart disease, a whole range of of illnesses that are associated with the so-called industrial Western diet. And we've seen the economic colonization, as I would call it, and talk about it, rural communities and rural areas where we see the large corporate industrial agricultural operations basically extract all the wealth from the natural and human resources of rural areas and leaving them as rural ghettos in places that are like the new inner cities. We see the economic and political decay of rural communities and the corporate control of the food system that results in higher food prices.
Oh, man.
Damn it.
I don't know. What do we do, Joe? Oh,
If I knew how to deal with it, it would already be.
oh. John?
All right, who's on?
Everyone should mute except John. Whoever is not muted should be muted. I mean, you have to have control.
Mute everyone.
Fine.
Mute
Everyone
everyone
mute.
but John.
Whoever is the
Like 8 pages
host,
of
mute
people.
everyone and then kick that guy out.
Got it.
No,
If you can, just ignore it.
Got it.
Okay,
Sorry.
can you hear me now? Am I back on now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, let me start.
We hear you. And
Okay,
you're
let me
doing a
start
good
with,
job.
let me start with a second. I said the first condition is that we must conclude that the current system isn't working and can't work in the future. I mean, it's the environmental problems, the social problems, the economic problems, in addition to the rural economic decay, is we've seen the corporate takeover of the overall agri-food system that has no resemblance to a competitive market anymore, and it's resulting now in higher food prices, even though farm level prices continue to decline. The second thing we have to have in order to bring about systemic change, we have to know what to change to. We have to realize that there are realistic alternatives to in place this industrial system. I've been working for the past 30 years or so with people that are creating this alternative system, this regenerative, resilient, sustainable alternative to industrial agriculture. It started off with the organic movement. When the organic movement become more industrial, we've had the real organic emerge. That's talking about a regenerative, resilient kind of organic farming. We talked about biodynamic farming that started in the early 1900s with Rudolf Steiner, ecological farming, natural farming, agroecology that are important particularly on the international arena, the combination of agroecology and food sovereignty, which I think performed kind of the conceptual umbrella for a whole new food system that tailored to specific people and specific cultures living in particular places, farming in harmony with nature, meeting the needs of people in those particular places. We need to recognize that the marginal economic advantages of the large industrial system may be important to these large industries that are producing millions of units a year, but being very little as far as consumer prices are concerned. And this whole alternative system is affordable and is further developed in terms of technology and know-how than the industrial system was back when I was a kid, when we made the policy shifts that took us toward an industrial agriculture. Third, we need to realize that we can make this transition, that it's possible. We must have hope. And we need to realize that the industrial agriculture system could not survive without continuing government subsidies and support from the public in terms of public policy. This system is tremendously official, but it's fragile, as we saw during the pandemic. And it's us propping up this industrial system. Our farms, like our banks, have become too big to fail. And so we ask the taxpayers to prop them up. If we stop doing that and we had a transition in farm policies to begin to support and make it possible for people that really want to create a sustainable, resilient food system for the future to do so, we could see explosive changes that would change this food system very quickly. We made the transition from traditional family farming to industrial agriculture within a period of about 50 years. I've lived through that transition. I know that a transition to a better future with a sustainable, resilient, regenerative agriculture is possible. And that's the reason I continue to do what I do, because I know there is hope. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Very good, very good. I'm from El Salvador. I'm listening to you.
I'm sorry, would someone please disable the chat?
Exactly. Disable the chat.
Thank you so much, John. I'm sorry for the difficulties, but that was wonderful.
Couldn't be helped.
Yeah. I'm really pleased to introduce our second speaker, Ollie Fisher of the Green Party of St. Louis. He's executive director of the Ghan Eden Agriculture and Ecology Enterprise,
Niggers.
which promotes healthy lifestyles and environmental preservation. He has been a chemical engineer, dentist, and president of Missouri Board of Health and Senior Services. So Ollie, welcome, and we'll try to keep this under control here.
Wow. Never seen anything like this. First, I just like to say that John did a superb job with all the interference that he had. It's just amazing. And I could really just say ditto, because he touched on just about every topic regarding agriculture and the downfalls of it. I'm going to go right into my presentation, if you all don't mind, because we have very little. I don't want to get interrupted here again. So I'm going to go to sharing my screen, if you all don't mind. I've got a PowerPoint presentation. So.
Okay, here it comes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, should be coming up. All right, thank you very much. And Stan, thank you also. Want to also thank the Green Party and all the other sponsors for this program today. I see nothing more important than our overall health. And our health is intricately involved and connected to the food that we consume. And you will see that today as I go through my presentation. I'm going to start my timer here because I don't want Barbara or anybody to jump me later. So, okay, I'll try to stick to the time. Really, health and wellness begin in the mind, as far as I'm concerned. We've been convinced as to what is a healthy diet. And we've been convinced that our scientists are no more, you know, they know everything and they wouldn't give us anything that would be harmful and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And we know today, just looking at the results of what we have brought forth today, we know that Americans are extremely sick today. Our policies contribute to the illness, our illness, as well as especially our minorities. And food is used as a weapon to dominate cultures around the world because it's so integral. Food and water is so integral to life. Multinational conglomerates contribute to our poor health. And what can you do to protect yourself? I wanted to try to touch on all of these if I can in a few minutes. Any one of these topics can take a half an hour or more, but I'm gonna try to touch on them if I can very briefly today. Current agricultural practices really are a part of our way of life. Bear with me 1 second. I need to move my screen out of the way here. Okay. Agricultural practices are threatening our way of life, with, just as John said, polluting our air, our water, and our soil. Contaminated food and beverages are also affecting our health. I made this the chain, I've called this the chain of life, you know, beginning with the soil, because, you know, I say we came from the dust of the earth, right? And our nutrients come from the soil. And for those people that still consume meat, you know, we're told that protein, you have to have meat for protein, but animals get their protein from the soil. And so we're getting it secondhand. So you don't have to have meat in order to get your protein, as many myths will say. But along this chain, starting with the soil and the water, our companies now have contaminated the soil and the water. They've contaminated the crops along the way with spraying. They contaminate the food with additives and chemicals. And all of these impact our health and our wellness. And so why is the soil so important? Well, I'm not gonna go through all of these, but you can see the screen yourself, hopefully. But it's extremely essential to life because that's where we get our nutrients from. And soil is not just dirt, it's not inert, it's live. They're fungi, they're bacteria, et cetera, in the soil that are crucial to the plants absorbing these nutrients and sustaining them. And many of the chemicals that are used now by these corporations and farmers actually kill the soil. They destroy the soil and the microbes in the soil that we need for healthy, nutritious, and safe foods. The Surgeon General report, this is where I started out with our wellness center here. My goal after treating sick patients for 40 years, to say, well, let's try to work on helping people stay healthy instead of having to fix people when they're broken. And I thought that made a lot of sense. But in doing so, it came out that diet was the most determining factor for non-smokers. It's the major determinant for disease is diet. And so that's why we started our organic farm, because food is so crucial to prevention of disease and to helping us overall with our overall health. So therefore, a healthy, robust, safe, and non-toxic agricultural system is crucial to our overall health and wellness, just as John mentioned in his presentation. One of the reasons we're in the condition we're in today is because of the lobbying by these big mega corporations. I don't know if some of you are as old as I am and remember the program Monty Hall with Let's Make a Deal. Well, that's what happens. That's what our politicians have been doing with these big corporations, these agribusinesses and food and beverage industries. And they spend upwards of $150 to $200 million a year to lobby Congress so that they are not regulated to provide safe, healthy food and environments. And they generally get what they pay for. So what do they get? All of these chemicals, which by the way, anything that destroys life that would kill an insect is not something that we want to consume either. But these things are in our foods, the herbicides, the insecticides, the caricides, which are T and Flicks, the fungicides, they're all in the environment. They stay in the environment in our food supply. And we have because of the lobbying, we have little or no governmental regulation of these industries. We also have another thing called adjuvants, which are when they can combine chemical formulations and they don't have to tell you what's in them. And so you can have toxic chemicals as part of these adjuvants, these chemical formulations, and they're not listed as what's in them. And the same thing is in our food labeling, with artificial flavoring and coloring. You don't know what's in it. They don't have to tell you what chemicals are in them. They just give you a blank definition of what's there. They just call it something. And then finally, as these pesticides become more and more resistant, the farmers use more and more of these toxic chemicals in the environment because these pesticides, insects and so forth become resistant, and so they have to use more and more chemicals. And then one thing I didn't gloss over there, most scientific research, they find that whoever funded the research, 75% of the time, they get the results that they want, that they paid for. Okay. Another thing I wanted to mention too was about how we exploit other countries because of the cheap labor, because of the lack of regulation. We go to these poorer countries and we pollute their air and their water even more so than we do it in the US. And these farmers are not trained on use of protective equipment, on the proper handling of these toxins. And so many of them succumb to these diseases and infections as well. And today we're experiencing a worldwide contamination of our soil, our water, and atmosphere, and it's due to uncontrolled greed by wealthier nations. Multinationals control the seed production, the fertilizer, they control what the market pricing is. And so these farmers really end up becoming, remaining slaves to these farmer colonizers. Food production is mostly for export, so they don't even get to consume the products in many cases that they're growing. And
Ollie, this is a 1 minute reminder.
well, I got 2 minutes on mine. I'm gonna go by mine.
Fair
Okay.
enough, fair
Your
enough.
health is your wealth. So what can we do? One of the things that was mentioned by John is buy locally grown organic fruits and vegetables. Other things we can do, you test your water. They've got test kits at Lowe's and Home Depot. They don't test for everything, but at least you can, they'll test for the heavy metals, toxic metals, wash your fruits and vegetables, peel them prior to consumption, plant a home garden, get locally grown organic products. If you eat meat, make sure that you cook it thoroughly, become politically active so that we can control our politicians allowing these actions to occur, and then educate yourself. Okay, capitalism today seeks the cheapest and most profitable manufacturing methods, exploiting the workers and the environment. We encourage safer and healthier options. It's time for us to do a reset on our principles and our values, okay? And that's it for me. If you want a deeper dive, I had a book I wrote a couple years ago, Prescription for a Sick Nation. And then there's information on our nonprofit, Ghan. So thank you. I hope I got through. Mine says 40 more seconds. So I got out ahead of the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ollie.
Yes, thanks so much, Ollie. And related to what Ollie was talking about, industrial agriculture has made food production, which should be, and the whole purpose of agriculture is to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, fix it in a form that is edible by human beings, and take that system and make agriculture a net emitter of greenhouse gases because of the use of fossil fuels in traction and in fertilizer production, et cetera. One recent study found that the two main things that can be done to reduce the emissions from agriculture and turn agriculture back into a net absorber of carbon dioxide instead of an emitter are to end the production of feedlot cattle and production of the feed grains that go into the feedlot system, as well as the CAFO systems for swine and poultry. That's one of the two things. The other is to end the production of fuel ethanol to take corn and sorghum and turn them into fuel to go into the tanks of vehicles. I'm very happy now to introduce Supraba Seshan, who I am pleased to count as a friend of mine. She is a rainforest conservationist at the Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary, a plant conservation and habitat restoration center in India's Western Ghats and the mountains in the southwest corner of India. She won the 2006 Top Environmental Prize from the UK's Whitley Fund for Nature. And I'm also happy to say that back in the 1990s, she was an intern at the Land Institute in where I work. Welcome, Supraba.
Hello, and I must say it's good morning for me. It's
Yes.
7 a.m. Thank you so much, Stan and Preeti, and everyone at this meeting for inviting me. I think both speakers who've been already sharing their views have covered so much, and all that I can do is really support it from this land that is India. And there are three key points in case there's interruption that I would just like to say that that India is tremendously diverse. Everybody knows that. It's also culturally diverse, and that restoration is possible and must be done because of the tremendous range of cultural diversity in the land and how different peoples across this vast area. I mean, it's only a third of the size of the United States, but it's on par in terms of species diversity and biomic diversity, ecosystemic diversity. But where it excels is really, it's like 700 different ethnic groups. And 8.2% of the population of India is indigenous, is Adivasi. So that's over 100 million people still living close to the forest or to the land or to rivers and oceans, and who require this and sustain it mutually. So it's a mutual process. And this is what we need to engage with at a global level, that everything is connected, and what happens in the US, affects India, and what happens in India is going to affect the rest of the world, because it's such a net exporter of food, and India itself is dependent on this vast climate system that's called the monsoon, and that is subject to so many forces. So maybe if there's one thing that I want to stress really today is this interdependency of peoples and other and non-humans and the ecosystemic diversities. So, even in my area, which is a small little plateau in the Western Ghat Mountains, where something like 50 miles by 50 miles, there are over there's 17 indigenous groups. And what we're talking about here are 17 different relationships with the natural world. And, so that is the thing that is going to keep India going, because it is the people on the land that keep the broader society going. And, what was once a horizontal and a vast matrix of peoples and lands obviously has been turned by forces of, oppression into a vertical system. And this is what we're all up against, is a kind of a monocultural, mechanical, machine-based capitalistic model that is, really decimating extraordinary cultures. And I'm so privileged to live in the middle of societies that are still sustaining themselves and are sustaining the forests, which are in turn sustaining rivers. And these rivers are sustaining something like 240 million people who live downstream of the rivers that come out of these mountains. So it's how can we constantly keep in our minds the importance of biological cultural diversity. And I'm so deeply grateful to the Land Institute in Kansas, where I spent that year, where we looked at the prairie diversity, the tremendous numbers of species and the contrast with what is there in the wheat monocultures. And likewise here, I live in a mountain chain which has something like 7,000 different plant species in the forests and the swamps and the high elevation montane grasslands and so on, which is being replaced by beverages essentially and an urban culture. So, so if we had to emphasize anything, and I work a lot with people, that if we had to emphasize processes of restoration, there are systematic shifts that we can make in cultivation itself. And we recognize that peoples all over the world have cultivated, and there are so many examples of cultivation that John has mentioned, which are being replaced by this one, which are being, not just replaced, they're being suppressed and, destroyed by this one system, which is chemically intensive and is, single species oriented. If we had to make, as restorationists and forest conservationists, the things that I suggest to people, or simply when you go from annual to perennial, this is the great work of the Land Institute, but this is also the work of the peoples of the earth. That is, that they had actually, perennial crops intermixed with annuals, to shift from chemical to organic. I mean, organic is a problem because it also becomes extractive, actually, in some way. When you use biomass from one place and you have to put it somewhere else, it becomes also a problem. But it is infinitely better than chemical farming. And then if you shift from exotic to native, which is what really in this culture here, people are still using 1,000 species of indigenous plants for medicine. So, so if that is being replaced by rubber and cinchona for quinine and tea, what is the health of these peoples who have co-evolved with their landscapes? We're talking about 1,000 species of medicinal plants in this region. That is tremendous biological diversity. And then the final shift would obviously be, and once again, this is beautifully exemplified in the work of the Land Institute, is simply when you go from a single species to a multi-species system. So in our work as restoration ecologists, what we are emphasizing is this move from, one or two or three crops to maybe 100 in a single land holding, which in our case is, maybe 1 acre in size. People have land holdings of 1 to 2, half a hectare. And yet they are the true preservers of biodiversity. What you can do in these small home gardens, which stretch across the landscape in between all the plantations and urbanization effects, are these home gardens with tremendous crop diversity, from trees, old big trees, to herbs, from tubers, giant big fat tubers inside the ground, to climbers and creepers and fruit bearing trees. And this is the old way, and it is sustainable, and it is part of people's health, and they have come back to it, interestingly, during this lockdown period, when chemicals were not available because of supply chain breakups. So when you have a lifestyle which is partly hunting perhaps, and partly honey gathering perhaps, partly cultivational, pastoral, you actually support the land. When you replace all these by one single lifestyle in a place that is culturally diverse, you are heading towards disaster. So we're talking about, in my mountain, and I really don't want to speak about all of India, just my mountain range, because, in this 1,200 kilometer long mountain range, you have, something like 90% of the forests have been replaced in one way or another. And that is so intimately connected with as the source of rivers. So how do you have restoration at the scale when you have a high population density, a tremendously erosive force at work, and climate dependent factors that are also influencing what people do? So maybe what I want to leave with this talk with is that the imagination matters, and if I can be inspired by 17 different lifestyles and approaches to land in my little corner of the neighborhood. I mean, those of us who are connected on a larger global scale have available to us these possibilities of human experimentation with non-humans, and that surely should inform what we do at a global level. And, so I'm seeking I suppose I'm seeking this alliance because I believe alliance is necessary, but I'm also offering from this land possibilities. So,
This is
so
just
that's
just
what
a
I want to
reminder.
leave us with. Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Suprabha, and we look forward to in a little while having more discussion of this. And in addition, the global South is threatened not only by industrial agriculture, but also by the industrial world's energy hunger, especially for energy generated by erroneously named carbon-free sources of electricity, including hydroelectric power and energy from biomass, both of which occupy huge stretches of land in the world, and a lot of it in the global South, displacing both the kind of livelihoods that Suprabha was talking about and the healthy ecosystems that she was talking about. So we're both for the production of food and for energy. We are ruining life both for human and non-human species. Okay, finally, I'm pleased to introduce our fourth and final speaker, Mitch Pearson, who's a retired educator, an artist, and an urban farmer who teaches how to farm without toxic chemicals in order to help decarbonize Black agriculture in North St. Louis City and County in Missouri. So welcome, Mitch.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I had no idea that in 2016 I would be moving to St. Louis. I'm originally from Wichita, Kansas, and I grew up on an urban farm just right outside of the city. I grew up in a Black cowboy culture. My mom was from Arkansas, my dad's from Oklahoma. And in that little community we had, now that they call it urban farming now, but back then it was people with big gardens in their backyards. They raised chickens, pigs, goats, whatever they had in their yard. And that culture there was a culture of plenty. Even though a lot of people thought that we were poor, we were not impoverished, so to speak. We had all those necessities to live on. Urban renewal came in and wiped that all out. They took it over, and the segregated school that I was planning on going to that next year, there's a highway sitting on it now, went right through that. So when I got to St. Louis, I started having flashbacks about how my life worked then and how it relates to what's going on in St. Louis now. So I came here to study the Montessori system. And as I was studying that system, it reminded me of growing up on the farm, because there were so many different opportunities to learn, to discover. So I combined those two things together to start the Urban Farm School in Spanish Lake. We were fortunate enough, by the grace of God, to obtain 13 acres. And we work with schools, churches, any organization that's interested in learning how to farm. You know, growing up on that farm back in the 60s, we didn't use that many chemicals at all. I thought about it. We mainly use like manures for fertilizer. And I remember there was always plenty of worms in the soil. Now that tells me that the soil was healthy. And when I started working with children here in St. Louis, most were just totally foreign with gardening, growing food, and the whole bit. With one club I worked with, the children didn't want anything to do with gardening. So I was working with the Missouri Extension Service, and she was bringing in like carrots and foods of that nature from Whole Foods. So I said, you know, stop doing that. I'm growing the food at the farm. Let me bring it. So I brought in a tub of carrots one day with the soil there, right around those carrots, and I had those children dig those out and wash them and eat them. At first, they were reluctant to it, but then after a while, they started really enjoying it. And after a while, they started really looking forward to growing food, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, all kinds of food. And then the parents got involved in it. You know, in using my education background, it dawned on me that growing food is child development sensitive. You know, they just took to it like ducks to water. So what we do here at the Urban Farm School, we just break everything down. I mean, we can go as basic as you want, talking about soil structure, you know, talk about how we can take leaves, tree clippings, and all kinds of yard waste and compost it and turn that soil to make it come alive, to where there are worms in there and all kinds of living things. We also look at the climate here, how we go from maybe March to November of different seasons, provide different opportunities to engage in food. One of our projects that we're starting on now is called the Indigenous Edible Forest. We have about 6 acres here of old growth trees that's full of honeysuckle. But we're cleaning that out now. We're planting pecan trees, pawpaws, different types of berries, so that when children are studying about pawpaws, nobody knows what that is unless you actually get one and taste it. So that's going to be our outdoor classroom. So as we engage with schools and churches and things of that nature, what we're trying to do is reinfuse that familiarity with agriculture and growing food. During this pandemic, it really was shocking to see some of these food banks bringing food to different areas and giving away food. A lot of the food was good, but a lot of it was old and processed. And that bothered me a lot. You know, and my whole theory is, why don't we start looking at urban farming, urban farm schools, to bring the children up in a nutritionally sound environment so they'll understand the process. You know, I have a friend who is part of the Missouri Farmers Union. He talks about how the corporate takeover in the rural area is just driving family farms off the land. You know, I maintain that farming, producing your own food, is democracy in action. You know, our whole democratic system is really based on having land and producing food. You know, a lot of our health issues that was brought up earlier in this tonight, just it's based right in our food production system. What we want to do is look at this in its broadest way, broadest perspective. One thing that I tell people, you know, as an artist, teaching elementary school for 20 some odd years, I would have to explain to children black and white people, that concept, because most young children don't get it. That's something that they're learned through time. I had an argument with a second grader and he won about color. His dad was black, mom was white. And I said, look, man, you're brown. He said, no, I'm mixed. And he would never come off of that. So that got me to thinking, you know? And back in the 70s, I believe, there was a commentator who said it was Tony Brown. Tony Brown's Journal is what it was. And he would always say, the concept of black and white people is a social construct. You know, and going back further, W.B. Du Bois said that the problem of the 20th century was the color line. He said that back in 1903. And here we are in 2021 dealing with the same issue. They're saying that the biggest problem in America is domestic terrorism, which is right in step with the color line. So the people that I'm around say, look, we've got to get rid of this notion of people being black and white. We've got to think in terms of the basics that all connect us together. And it's that Constitution. We the people. You know, if we the people can get together and start acting like we the people, we can get rid of all the corporate madness that's going on today. So, you know, as we go through these cycles, we see children. If you look at all the different statistics on children, like today, a 15-year-old, you know, went in and you know, murdered in a school. I'm saying, well, now they were talking to that student earlier. If we were more democratic, more civic minded, I think we would not lose so many children because they're engaged and they become
I'm sorry,
involved.
this is a 1 minute reminder.
Okay. So overall in St. Louis, we're dealing with those, the systematic classism, sexism, racism, poverty. We're dealing with all that. And we're trying to put this in a mechanism where we can grow it to where we can have more functioning, democratically minded people.
All right.
I can talk to you all night about that. So, but thanks a lot.
Well, thanks, Mitch. We'll get back to you in a little bit. I think we now pause for a word from Don Fitz.
Okay, thank you, Stan. I want to tell you, everybody, that 2 months from tonight, in February the 2nd, we're having a webinar on food, energy, and water. I will be speaking on the devastating effects of dams, especially regarding hydropower. Sylvia Secchi will speak on water contamination from confined animal feeding operations. We anticipate having a speaker on overfishing in West African nations by corporate factory fishing ships. And we may have a speaker on water depletion, including industrial withdrawals. What we would really like to have is a speaker on deep sea mining. So if you can write it, you can't write it in the chat, but send me an email. And if you don't know my email address because you haven't corresponded with me, whoever sent you an announcement of this almost certainly has my email address. And I would really like to have a speaker on deep sea mining. But now I want to ask a question for all of the speakers. There's many as who wish to answer it. We know we're told over and over again that we need more energy, more energy, more energy. And I want to be pathologically pragmatic in dealing with this. And that is, I hope each speaker could tell us one way we could reduce the amount of energy used for agriculture while we increase the quality and our quantity of food which is available. How would you do that? And let me give you an example. If food were raised or grown, more food were grown locally, less energy would be used for transportation, more diverse crops would be raised, and the quantity of nutritious food would increase because we would have fewer monocultures. So if you can give an example, not the one of transportation, but when we get to comments by speakers, I hope that each speaker could address that issue.
Okay, thanks, Don. But for now, we'll go to the comments from the co-sponsors, right? And then we'll get to that later. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. So we have a number of the groups who have co-sponsored tonight's program who are going to make some brief comments, and we'll start off with the African People's Socialist Party, and Akele Anai is going to speak on behalf of a number of organizations. African National Women's Organization, African People's Solidarity Committee, the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project, International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So she'll be speaking for all of these groups. So Akele, you've got 8 minutes. Welcome.
Uhuru, and thank you for having me onto this discussion. And yes, representing the African People's Socialist Party and the groups that were just mentioned are, constitute the Uhuru movement. Yeah, I just appreciate you stating that. But again, I just am appreciative of being invited to speak at this event because we in the African People's Socialist Party, we are African internationalists. That is the theory that guides the practical work that we carry out in the world. And we know that the topic being discussed today requires our intervention. In fact, we sound different, and this discussion, we have it differently because we recognize that what we're dealing with when we're talking about a broken agricultural system, that we're dealing with a product of colonialism. And colonialism, it's important to say, is not just some policy by some governments, but colonialism is the origin of the economic configuration of this entire planet, to which the agricultural system responds to. So colonial capitalism is a global social system, and everything and everyone participates under that structure. And so when we look at the advent of this agricultural system that's being characterized as broken right now, when we look at the advent of that agricultural system, it's based on stolen labor and land of African and indigenous people. It's based on, slave plantations right here in the US and the theft of indigenous land and lives. So that's what this agricultural system that we are talking about today, that's its origins, that's its root. And so to understand this agricultural system, you have to understand where the initial breaking actually takes place. And, the breaking didn't happen, within a year, 10 years ago. The breaking point started, and it's not at the point that white people, the colonizer population, began to experience this as an issue. So this has been broken for African people, for indigenous people for a very, very long time. And as an African, speaking on behalf of the African People's Socialist Party and African toilers of the world, we are deeply offended that the colonizer, those who would steal this land, the indigenous land, and enslaved African people and develop this agricultural system with stolen Black labor and stolen indigenous land, finds the system broken after centuries where millions of us have already died, been forcibly dispersed, and whole agricultural systems destroyed. Prior to colonialism, the indigenous people living on this land, taking care of this land, African people in Africa, people in Asia, Mexico right here stolen, half of Mexico stolen at gunpoint. This is the reality of the world in this social system. And prior to Europe invading all of these places and settling and taking these resources for the benefit of Europe and for the benefit of the white world wherever it would settle, before that, we had our own methods, our own ways of life, and the land and our relationship to the land was totally different, and it was distorted by colonialism coming into being. And so this long history that, you know, that I'm just condensing right now for the purposes of this discussion, that this history is that the colonizer population in this discussion is not troubled by that history where Africa has been looted, African people have been forced to work the land, indigenous systems totally erased, you know, where everyday white people reaped those benefits. I'm based in St. Petersburg, Florida right now. The APSP is an international organization. I'm based in St. Petersburg, Florida, where before there was this tourist city, there were swamps and African people were forced to clear the swamps. African people then had to pave the streets in order to benefit and for the efficiency in the white community. So when we look at this, we can say colonialism is the thing that broke the agricultural system, and it has caught up to the colonizer population today, which is why it's being discussed among the colonizer population today as something that's being broken just now, when in fact it was broken 600 years or so ago when the first Europeans set foot in Africa with the desire to steal the people, steal the land and the resources. But the reality is that you can't fix this agricultural system where blood stains the soil. You can't grow anything fresh from that. You know, when you have indigenous people being forced into concentration camps called reservations today, when you have African people being gunned down in the street by police today, African people being gentrified out of our communities, no access to food, clothing, shelter, no power in our own hands, that's the soil of this agricultural system. And there's no life that can grow from that, nothing effective that can grow from that, nothing sustainable that can grow from that. So all those who are honest, who genuinely want to fix the agricultural system, you have to be fighting against colonialism. You have to want to destroy every system birthed through colonialism. And there is no other way around it. There's no policy, no quick fix, no solar panels, nothing that's going to be able to fix this contradiction outside of fighting and struggling against colonialism. That means that you can't obscure the struggle by challenging white privilege, which is the colonizers' attempt to hide their true relationship with the rest of us. Because African people are not engaged in the contest of fighting white privilege, and the agricultural system that's being characterized as broken did not come into being through white privilege. White privilege was something that white people managed to amass through, the colonial enslavement of African people. But the reality is this is a battle between the oppressed and the oppressor, the colonized and the colonizer, and African people will not be satisfied with green colonialism. And so we say that the best environmentalists, they fight against colonialism. And if we are to participate in this process, we do so as a means of destroying this blood-sucking system that has made it impossible for African people to produce for ourselves for the last 600 years. And we call on you to join the anti-colonial struggle. Destroy colonialism, you fix an agricultural system because you put the power, the resources, the land, and the lives back into the hands of those who it rightfully belongs to. And those are the lives and the resources of Africa and African people, indigenous people on this planet, indigenous people on this land, Asia, and all throughout the world where the colonizer has set their sights to extract and exploit the resources of those areas. That all has to be turned right side up by turning that back over into the hands of colonized people and destroying the relationship of colonizer and colonized forever. That's the only way to fix a broken agricultural system. So with that, we just wanted to intervene in that discussion just to say that if we're not having, if we're not raising the struggle of anti-colonialism, then we are attempting to put Band-Aids, on something that is just absolutely not sustainable. The fact of the matter is the system is in crisis and it's falling apart, and the agricultural system is just an aspect of the thing that's being totally widened open and exposed as something that cannot be sustained through a parasitic system of colonial capitalism. So again, representing the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, and we say join us in the fight to overthrow colonialism. A victory to the oppressed. Uhuru, thank you.
Thank you, Akale, very much for that essential message. Next, we have the Massachusetts Green Rainbow Party with Frank Jeffers, and he's representing the Broome Tioga Green Party and the Green Party of Onondaga County. You have 6 minutes, Frank. right there.
There you go. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
I've basically been doing research for the Green Party because there's a tremendous amount of information that has been suppressed here in the United States, a tremendous amount of research that has not been done for 20 years because George Bush cut it off at the roots with his so-called hydrogen economy. That was just an excuse to extirpate everything else to favor the oil companies. And we haven't recovered yet. And there is tons of stuff being done around the world, but America doesn't know about it because our media doesn't bring it here. So we will think it's a some things are a fairly hopeless situation where actually people in other parts of the world are making decent progress on it. My own background for research, I've done research for a good many years on different things. I started out observing regenerative agriculture in Japan in 1947, 1948. And I got to observe population overshoot, famine, population crash. And it was not great. It was not a great thing to look at. And there had been, of course, disastrous war where every city had been burnt to the ground, almost everyone except a couple. And 4 million people had been incinerated by fire bombs. And the A-bombs didn't amount to a piss hole of snow compared to what actually had happened. And they were not the reason the Japanese surrendered. They surrendered because the Russians had entered the war. But that's enough about all that. One of the research things that was brought up here about adjuncts to some of the poisons that are in our food. You can go to glyphosate, Roundup. When my research turned up that probably the thing causing most of the harm is the solvents that are used to potentiate the glyphosate. Nobody tells you how long they last, but they do destroy the cells in your gut. And I'm sure they're responsible for a lot of the problems people are having today. That's just one of the things you turn up. One of the things I've been working on is in regenerative agriculture is I've been growing African maize. I had a friend send me the seeds from Africa. And if the agriculture department was to cause trouble over that, well, I don't have any documentation. I'm just, I think it is. Okay. But maybe I'm lying, from Africa. I got about 300 pounds of it this year. It's nitrogen fixing. People don't know that a lot of varieties of maize contain a bacteria that fixes nitrogen, the same as beans do. And it's grown in the tropical areas. Often it's grown in soil so poor that corn shouldn't grow, but then you get giant corn. Wait a minute, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Yeah, this stuff here, that's just overrunning my house. I got hundreds of pounds. I got a couple 100 pounds of this stuff. But it's, I was growing it for the biomass. And you can't condemn all biomass. And if you look at the sawtooth curve of the CO2 level in the Earth's atmosphere, you have a huge amount of biomass that is appearing and disappearing every year. And a lot of that is from the C4 photosynthesis of grass plants, which would be corn, sorghum, rice, wheat, barley. And a good part of the energy that goes into those is not in the food, it's into the biomass, it's into the stalks and the leaves. And that rots away every year, goes back to the atmosphere. So you might as well get some energy out of it. There's a lot of energy there. I think a lot of the fertilizer used in the United States is added to the soil in order to get that stuff to rot.
This is a 1-minute reminder. 1
Okay.
minute.
In a third world, they just burn it, and it creates a huge amount of air pollution and a lot of carbon dioxide going back to the atmosphere. So, research does turn up things. We got a system that's economically efficient, but energy inefficient. And if you're looking at your investments, you're on the curve where your debt is going to double every so many years. If you're going out of credit cards, which might have 30% interest, the exponential equation for increase of debt is the number 70 divided by the percentage rate of your debt. And if your credit card's at 30% and you stop paying on it, regardless of late payments and so on, your credit card debt will double in about 3 years.
I'm sorry, but your time's up.
Okay, well, I think I made my point. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Frank. Okay, we're going to move to the 2-minute comments from people representing
In about 3 years.
various organizations. And after the first couple of comments, I'll come back to the speakers and see if y'all have any responses to the two folks we just heard from, or the next two. So please be thinking about that. First, for the first 2-minute comment, we have Zaki Baruti representing the Universal African Peoples Organization. Are you there, Zaki?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Okay, first and foremost, I would like to compliment the panelists on the information that has been shared. But I would just like to echo and ditto what Sister Alea brought forth in her analysis this evening. After all the great conversation, I think generally everyone on this call or on this Zoom recognize that their capitalism, colonialism has not been good for our people. So the issue becomes beyond the conversation is how do we systematically dismantle it so we can have a wholesome world? So that's the challenge that I like to put forth from this point on, as far as beyond the conversation, what is going to be the concrete steps to try to dismantle capitalism and colonialism. So, and I want to again salute my sister for her analysis. Also a shout out to Benenya, Ollie, for your great presentation, as well as everyone else. And the brother who's a former in Spanish Lake, I definitely want to get in touch with you, because we need to exemplify to the entire community what you're doing there as an example of what must be done as one small step. So liberation in our lifetime. Peace.
Thank you, Zaki. Next, we have South Carolina Green Party with a comment by Bill Kreml. You there, Bill? Okay, let's move on back to the speakers. Well, if y'all have a very brief comment to make at this point, John Ikerd.
Yeah.
You have something to say?
Let me comment on, first of all, the question about how we reduce energy. I think probably the best way practical way to start on that is most of the energy, or a lot of it, is used in nitrogen fertilizer in our crops. If we go to diversified crop rotations and move away from the nitrogen fertilizer, using the high levels of nitrogen fertilizer, that would go a long way. And the nitrogen fixing crops are not limited to just soybeans and the things that we talk about, legumes. Grasses and other things can fix nitrogen if you have healthy soils to work in combination with those. They just store them in a different way. And then if we move away from the large concentrated animal feeding operations, then that means that we're moving away from the corn soy systems, which are the big users of energy there as well. I'd like to comment also on the issue of colonialism and capitalism and this sort of thing. And what I support is the international food sovereignty movement. This is an indigenous peoples movement, and it's about declaring that food is a basic human right, and that people also not only have a right to good, wholesome, sustainably produced food, but they have a right to determine their own food systems and their own systems of agriculture within their community. I think when we change the system overall in this country, I can't go back 400 years and change what people did then, but I can support a system of food sovereignty and a system where at the local level, agroecology, which fits in with food sovereignty. And I think we're going to change the system starting at the local community from the ground up. I don't see any other way to change it. It's like changing a boat when you start to change the trim pad, which changes the rudder, which changes the boat. And we got to have the patience to work within local communities to change the local communities, not just food sovereignty, but economic sovereignty, where we decentralize things, decentralize control. And as we move from community to community, then we'll build the momentum across the whole country to begin to change the system at the state, national, and international levels.
Thanks very much, John. Ollie, do you have some words for us?
Yeah, I think John did a great job of summarizing it, but I would go also to say that the agricultural system affects us all. I don't care whether you're black, brown, or green. We're all being affected by this toxic and capitalistic industrial system that we face today, no matter what your color. And so we all need to join hands and come together to replace this current system, because it's all about the bottom line for these corporate conglomerates. And it has nothing to do with the safety, effectiveness, and the healthiness of our food supply system. The monocultures are also hurting us and causing additional problems as well. So I think we just really need to really come together and realize that we're all on this planet. We're all stuck here for now, and I guess until Elon Musk and them figure out how to get us to Mars or something. But we need to take care of this planet that we're on right now, and I think it transcends race and everything else. I mean, we all have to breathe this air. We all have to eat the food that's produced, and so it's a situation that we all need to come together to resolve. So thank you for all the speakers, and thank you for the comments as well.
Amen. Thank you, Ollie. Suprabha?
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for this. Number of us have been not using the sixth mass extinction as a phrase to describe what's going on, but rather that this is an extermination event. It's not an extinction event. It's actually an extermination event. And it's the first and only, such event in the universe's life. So in this moment, which, I think African people have known this for a long time, but this event is as old as colonialism. It's as old as a particular form of civilization also, which certainly has been prevalent in India, that it is about cultural and ecological genocide. It's an extermination event. And I do not go by the word extinction anymore. And it's distinct from previous mass deaths of species, which were really through passive geological processes. And the current event, which is a few hundred years old or perhaps older in this society here, it involves slavery, it involves ecocide, it involves genocide. And the nature of this event, this extermination event, is domination, it's disorder, it's disease, it's debilitation, it's torture, it's slavery, it's unhappiness of a kind that society did not know 1,000 years ago. It's fear, it's addictions. The modern world is addicted, and that is rooted in the kinds of foods it eats and consumes. So, my word for this is the patriarch needs the world to be enslaved, tortured, and decimated in order for him to survive and to grow. And the patriarch is another word for capitalism in its modern form. So maybe that's where I'll finish my contribution.
Thank you so much, Suprabha. Okay, Mitch, do you have a few words for us?
Sure. As an educator, working with young people and dealing with child development, I'm thinking that agriculture is really a powerful mechanism to learn in. So I'm thinking that early education is key. Having proper resources is key. Make sure our policies fit the problem is key. And local food, growing food locally. Then having a decentralized democracy so that power can be shared, because there are warnings from our founding fathers and before that centralization kills democracy. When you centralize banks, power, resources. Boy, I have a t-shirt I'm going to have to get and let you guys see it. It's from Alexander Hamilton. It says that if you give the power to the many, they will, what words am I using? Oppress the few. If you give the power to the few, they will oppress the many. We made that into a t-shirt. I'll show you in a minute. But that's all I have to say about that at this point.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, next we're going to hear from Paul Lehman with the Missouri Green Party. You there, Paul?
Yes, I had to unmute here. My comment is centered around regenerative agriculture, and I don't know if that topic has been raised. John Ikerd raised that because I missed that presentation, but this is a system that incorporates animals in the system, as in the old days when in the farm life, as someone mentioned, they used animal manure for compost and for the garden to fertilize. So that's often an unrepresented position, which handles the role of animals in the environmental degradation, because in the regenerative agriculture, the animal itself becomes a part of the reduction to zero of the greenhouse gas emissions. So I thought that was a point that hasn't been made. One other thing I'd say is that I went to buy some oil. This is kind of off the topic, but there's now a oil that is not natural, and that oil is it causes environmental degradation, just as we've talked about with wind and solar and all of those as a replacement for the fossil fuel system.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. At this point, I'll remind everybody, if you are not a reader of greensocialthought.org, look it up. It's a great site that deals with a lot of these issues. And next, I'll welcome my Green Social Thought colleague, Angie Muller, for a comment.
Yeah, hello. Hi, everybody. I appreciate, all those presentations very much. And I think, okay, I don't even know where to start. I think I start with Zaki and about his dismantling capitalism. Zaki, I think it's not enough to dismantle capitalism. It's really important to, to work on overthrowing it, because, we've heard several people speak about how, agriculture is being affected by the capitalist system, or the imperialist system also, and the colonial system. And I think, what we are trying to do, as long as we have the system in place, is always trying to fix it after the fact. Look, I have an example, because Don asked me to say a little bit about Europe. And, I'm not so, up to date with everything that's going on in Europe, but I found one campaign which seems to be significant for that. It's the Free Our Seed campaign, and they see it as a victory, as a success to keeping, corporations from patenting seeds, which of course it is, because it would make things even worse. But we are always lagging behind in regards to what corporations are doing and what this system of domination does to agriculture. So, what gave me hope personally is, when John was talking about the regenerative, resilient organic farming, and Supraba was talking about, that we have to get back to the old ways, and that there are still a million people really living sustainably with so many different species. And Akile mentioning, we have to produce the African and indigenous people around the world have to produce for themselves, which I think is, the way where it needs to go. And, we probably can make a we here in the industrialized countries can probably make a contribution in supporting this, but the ultimate solutions will come from those countries where you still have this kind of resiliency, or where this old knowledge is still lived and promoted,
I'm sorry, your time is almost up.
Okay, can I just say one thing about this international food sovereignty movement? I'm not sure how it is structured, because I think if it is in a way that, we have white, scientists trying to secure all those old, still available plants and all this, then I think we are just reproducing the same kind of relationship that has brought us into this problem. So that's basically what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Stan, if I may,
Yes.
Angie just made mention, in terms of rather dismantling and the word overthrow. I just want to be clear, and I think I've stated it prior on a number of occasions. I'm talking about the complete overthrow also. I always use the story of Dracula, where we need to put a stake in the heart of capitalism. So I just want to be absolutely clear for everyone what my position is. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Zaki. Okay, next we have the Green Party of St. Louis with Digger, AKA Daniel Romano.
Okay, thanks. Great panel tonight. We covered a lot about capitalism, corporate control, the use of chemicals in agriculture, and racism. Right now, we have a campaign with the No Spray, St. Louis No Spray Coalition to ban pesticides, including herbicides, of course, and insecticides in the city of St. Louis. 130 other cities have them. Basically, we're fighting the same enemies here, in all these struggles. And in this case, the chemical industries, Bayer, which now owns Monsanto, and Dow and ChemChina. And part of that is their hold on the public perception. They have gotten, I still, when I bring up this thing about pesticides, well beyond Roundup, but that's the one that's in trouble. People think they spew the corporate propaganda. Oh, that's safe. And so many people believe it. And a step is to challenge that corporate propaganda and to let people know the truth. Also, as far as pesticides, in Bertha Lewis, who works with the Black Institute in New York City, they found out by doing research there that pesticides are used disproportionately in parks and urban spaces in majority Black and majority low-income neighborhoods. And we're investigating this in St. Louis. So, these problems are pervasive. We would like to see a total ban throughout the US on the use of Roundup and other pesticides. That's a big one to take on. And, Missouri, as anyone who lives here knows, is very, very conservative, the state legislature. So we want to start at the city level and do what we can. And as I said, 130 other cities in North America have banned pesticides or have various. And so that's why we're doing this now. As I say, we're all fighting the same enemies. If anyone is interested in doing a no spray or pesticide free in your city, Ms. Talley, since our chat is done, that's nospraystl@gmail.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me and us. That's nospraystl@gmail.com. Thanks a lot. And power to the people.
Yeah, power to the people, Digger. Y'all may not have noticed this, but we're going through organizations in reverse alphabetical order. So we're all the way up to G now. And our next commenter is from the Green Party of Florida, Robin Harris.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. Thank you, Don, for putting this together. Also, shout out and thanks to Comrade Akile and Mr. Baruti for your comments tonight and your input. I echo that 1,000%. And with that being said, I want to push back on something that I heard. I can't remember now from who, but someone said something like, we can't do anything about the past. And those are the types of colonial thoughts that keep us in the present predicament that we are in now. But we constantly push back. And so with that being said, I would like to bring into to conversation for not now, but beyond this is right now in Florida, Chuck O'Neill there is I think that the FL5, but the rights of nature. And, some of those rights, it talks about right to make a living, right to have a family, and it goes, it goes on and on. And it's a bit of a contradiction because right here in Florida, Orange County, I think about the life of Salathius Melvin, he was shot by Orange County police, dead at Florida Mall. And then a few years ago, James Bowdy, who was shot in Paramore. And that area is heavily gentrified. Policing systems put in those neighborhoods where we just see genocide. So yes, we need to explode our conversations and have them led by Black people, people that really know these systems, how we are affected by it. And so more conversations like these in the hands of the people that are impacted can really make a difference, and we can see that brokenness become something different. And also, if you'd like to support further, folks like myself, we're trying to make a change. I'm running for state office next year, 22. So thank you everyone for allowing me to be here, and kudos once again to comrades Akile, Mr. Baruti. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. And I think we'll pause one more time here and check in with the speakers. Do any of the speakers have any further comments?
Yeah, I'd like to respond. I think, I made the statement about I can't do anything to change what people did 400 years in the past. And if I didn't state it that way, that's what I meant to say. I can't change what they did. I can respond to that and try to, fix it to the extent that I can, but I can't go back and undo that. But I think the other part about capitalism and what we have now and replacing it and dismantling it, I think the important thing is that what brought capitalism about was an emphasis on human selfishness and greed, basically. It's that part of us, that selfish part of us that looks out for our self-interest and wants to do whatever we can to promote that self-interest. It happened that capitalism is the ideal system to incentivize and facilitate the selfishness and greed within us so that you can exercise it, and the people that exercise it most effectively can accumulate more and more power, more and more economic power, more and more political power. And that's inherent within that particular system, kind of facilitates what's already there. But if we dismantle capitalism and get away from it, and we turn it over to a whole new group of people, if they're still motivated by that individual selfishness and greed, that's what economics is about, that economic self-interest that you pursue it, then we'll end up with another system that's just as bad as the one that we have today, and it will be just as explosive, and we'll have something approaching to colonialism again. What I argue is that the change has to come within the human heart. When we realize that beyond some relatively modest level of economic well-being, material well-being, the accumulation of more and more is not what makes us happier. There's plenty of research to support that, and our common sense tells us that beyond some relatively modest level of economic well-being, it's a quality of our relationships among each other, within families, within communities, a feeling of being treated with justice and equity within society as a whole. And perhaps even most important is the sense of purpose and meaning in life, and knowing that what we do matters, that we can tell the difference between right and wrong. And I would argue that when we change and move away from this pursuit of blind individual self-interest, then we'll move away from capitalism. We'll move away toward a system that looks out for the community, that looks out for families, that looks out for society, and looks out for the future of humanity as a way of fulfilling our purpose here on earth. The change must come within, and then we'll see the reflection in the outer world around us.
Thanks, John. Do other speakers have something to say at this point?
This is Ollie. I'd like to just leave us with a comment that, a quote that Thomas Paine said several hundred years ago, and that was, a body of men holding themselves accountable to nobody ought not be trusted by anybody. And I think that pertains to our government regulatory agencies and how they've been corrupted and basically bought by our capitalistic system, to where you have a few people that are controlling basically our system and how we are today. And so again, I want to thank everyone and for their comments, and I appreciate being participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Ollie. Mitch, Supraba.
Hi. So, what I've been thinking about is that as a rainforest activist, it's my daily work to find alliance and amongst humans and non-humans, and this is critical in the agricultural, problem. And this alliance is necessary to stop further assault. And it's not a simple task, because most humans I know are still see the benefits of capitalism as great. And that life has never been so good. And the assault on their own bodies through the toxification of the environment, which has led to severely compromised immune systems, which is part of the current pandemic, this is just not perceived. And most people are hooked to the modern capitalist system as a provider of life. So your connection, the perception has shifted from nature as a provider of life to capitalism as a provider of life. And he or the system who provides life can also take away life. And this is this double bind that we're in. So the human will has been hijacked, and particularly now we're witnessing it being hijacked by the fear mongering around the pandemic. And so personally for myself, I seek alliance with those who are not wholly hijacked. But as a rewilder and as a restorationist, it is our sworn mission to salvage the ones burned and maimed and poisoned, and reconstituted from the living earth by the fires of industrial, civilized and militarized capital. And this is the great thing at work now, is militarized capital, digitized. So my friends and my comrades, we run refuges for non-humans and humans. And if agriculture, if the people who are close to the land in one way or another, see the land as a refuge, as a place of refuge, I think we can counter the assault. So maybe that's what I will leave us with, that in this alliance is also refuge and is also something that is going to counter the assault of this terrible thing that's at work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mitch?
Yeah, I am really happy to have joined you all this evening. As we go through this struggle, you kind of want to figure out who's out there seeing what you see. But I see that there are people who really get it. My hope is in democracy. We the people. I really believe in that. I think that America is just getting started trying to recognize what this we the people is really all about. So my drumbeat I intend to be going forward is pursuing a more perfect union, trying to find ways to sit down and talk to each other, not at each other, and try to figure out what's really important, that baseline we can all work from, and stop making so many World War mistakes. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I am right now.
Okay, thank you, Mitch. Okay, we have some more comments from people representing other groups. First off is M. Ward with the Green Party, Albuquerque metro area.
Hello, greetings, saludos de la tierra de los Tewa. Hi, greetings from the land of the homelands of the Tewa. In New Mexico, healing a broken agricultural system includes permanent protection of water and land from contamination and the support of traditional food providers. The military is big business in New Mexico, and it has produced big harms, including land and groundwater contamination in multiple parts of the state. Thousands of cattle were euthanized at a dairy near Cannon Air Force Base that poisoned the land and the water with PFAS, or per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. An extractive industry legacy mine turned the Animas River orange with heavy toxicants and heavy metal contaminants, and stressed sustenance farming in native lands in northwestern New Mexico for a time, and placed the watershed at risk for unhealthy heavy metal contamination or exposure in the future, depending on weather conditions. And healing the broken agricultural system also means that relief resources should be accessible to farmers of color who are often unaware or discouraged from loan or other assistance programs in times of drought or flood. It was recently reported that the Farm Service Agency denied farmers who use acequias, which are traditional water distribution methods centuries old in New Mexico. If they used acequias for irrigation, they were deemed not qualified for federal drought relief funds. And so that's almost like a direct attack on historical communities of color by the federal government by denying them certain protections that people using more modern methods, had access to those resources. So those are some other things to consider, other factors that all go into the current agricultural system. Thank you.
Thank you, Em. Next, we have Sarah Rubenstein with Great Rivers Environmental Law Center.
Good evening. I just want to thank all the speakers. It's been super interesting to hear what your perspectives and to learn new information. I'm a staff attorney with Great Rivers Environmental Law Center. We're a nonprofit law center located in St. Louis, Missouri, and we provide free legal services to organizations and individuals that are working to protect the environment and the natural world. So we have worked on issues relating to pesticide use with the No Spray Coalition of St. Louis, for example. We do lots of other work in lots of other areas, including sustainable lands, protecting clean air, clean water. So we are here as a resource in Missouri and St. Louis and even into Illinois to provide services for groups who want to work on this important work that you all are doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have Food Sleuth Radio with Melinda Himmelgarn.
Hi, thank you so much. I am so moved by the speakers this evening. And each one of you brought something so important to us. And for that, I'm very grateful to the organizers of this event. I'm a registered dietitian by training, and I moved into the media space because, as Digger said, we believe messages that we're told through the media. And so what I hope to do with Food Sleuth Radio is to amplify voices that can bring social and environmental justice to the food system. But I want to touch on a few things that were said this evening that I think were really noteworthy. The first has to do with Dr. Seshan's mention of imagination. I think that we truly need to use art and literature to move the dial. Science is great and facts are great, but we do need to rely on arts and humanity to make for a more just world. For all the scientific training I've received, the best education I ever received really was from my patients and from organic farmers who taught me to see the interdependence of all of us on Earth. As a dietitian, I truly believe that food is medicine. And I think that my grandparents instilled in me a reverence for food. And I wish that we had more of that, and I try to bring that forth to my audiences. I was very grateful that Mr. Pearson brought forth the 15-year-old who shot his fellow classmates. Certainly not the first school shooting that we've seen. But in touching on what Dr. Ikerd mentioned about this need for purpose, what if that child and others had felt a sense of purpose? Who abuses these children? Who fails to love them? If there was a school garden and that child was involved, would we have had the same outcome? I doubt it. I think that building community through food is essential, where everyone is needed and valued, and moving away from the consumer culture that is only killing us. I wanted to just mention that, this is a time of gratitude, and what I've learned in my profession is that what people are hungriest for and what we're most grateful for are our relationships. So I think building relationships around food and community around food, building a reverence for food is incredibly important. And I welcome all of you to join me on Food Sleuth Radio to hear of voices like yourselves who can push that dial. I'm also on the board of Beyond Pesticides, and I want to welcome everyone to look at that organization that is very much dedicated to all of the issues brought here this evening. So thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you, Melinda. Okay, Rachel Levy, Earth Dance Organic Farm School. You there, Rachel?
Hello?
Okay, Rachel, if we'll go on to the next person. If you come in, let us know. We'll go next to the Climate Council of Greater Kansas City with Bob Grove. Bob? Okay, how about Suzanne Hume, Clean Earth for Kids?
Hi, everybody. Oh, whoops.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. I'm Suzanne Hume with cleanearthforkids.org, and so happy to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for the fantastic speakers and all the important things you're talking about. I started cleanearthforkids.org after I was poisoned by pesticides. I was just on my patio, and the tomato farm near me was spraying toxic pesticides. So less to say about that, but I'd like to welcome everyone. We are doing some work. If you'd like to join us, we meet on Sundays. We can meet other days as well. And everyone is free to contact me at cleanearthforkids.org. And my email is just S at the front, like Suzanne, s@cleanearthforkids.org. Something we're doing that you may be interested in doing, we do a spreadsheet, and we list we get public records from cities and also school districts. And on the spreadsheet, we list what they're using. We look up the main active ingredient, and then we use PAN, Pesticide Action Network, their database about the number of countries where these pesticides are banned. Then we list why, right? So is it a lung irritant? I have a chronic lung condition now. Does it cause cancer? Why? Are all the other countries banning it? Because as we know, the US only bans 15 pesticides. China bans 51 and the EU over 175 pesticides. So if you haven't seen the 6-part article, it's by The Intercept and this journalist Sharon Lerner, you can check out the 6-part articles about how the EPA disregarded important toxicity testing. In fact, between the years of 2000, and it's on our website, if you go to cleanearthforkids.org, team 5, you can go to our main page and it's got some, links to articles, but also if you go to team 5 on cleanearthforkids.org, you're going to see links to the article I'm talking about. It's also on our website, and some facts about how the EPA waived over 89% of testing for pesticides between the years of 2011 and 2018. And it's still going on. And a quote by Senator Blumenthal talking about the Office of Pesticide Programs and how they have disregarded health. We attend many meetings of the EPA, and we are in California. We're based in California on Licenio lands, although we're a multi-generational organization with our interns all over the country on different indigenous lands. Anyway, so we attend the EPA meetings and also meetings in California. We definitely need help. These meetings are so important and set the direction for the whole country. In California, we
Suzanne,
just had, do I
Suzanne,
have 1 minute? Okay, in California, we had a meeting about pests.
Passed.
What?
Could you finish up? I'm sorry, you're over your 2 minutes.
Oh, I am over my whole 2 minutes? Okay, all right.
I want you to finish your thought though.
Sure. Okay, the main thing is I'm hopeful that everyone can check out our website. Please check out the video on pesticide treated seeds that are unregulated. Please check out the 6-part article by The Intercept that's on our website about the EPA and what's going on. And please reach out to us at Clean Earth for Kids. We'd love your help sitting on these key meetings that make a difference locally, by the state, and for the entire US. And thank you to everyone here.
Thank you, Suzanne. Now we've reached our friends at the very top of the alphabet, and we'll start with the Black Institute and Adil Ahmed. Are you there, Adil? Okay, let us know if you come on. Next, we have Attack the System with Keith Preston. Keith? Okay, one more chance here. The Alliance for Sustainable Communities with Farah Farbat.
Yes, I'm here. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to have been here and hearing the important thoughts of everyone who participated. I represent the Alliance for Sustainable Communities, and also I'm the founder of Beyond Capitalism, a working group, and editor of its publication, Left Turn. We also believe, as many of you do, that global capitalism's race for the bottom line is really taking us off to this race to the edge of the ecological cliff, and time is not on our side, and we need to really act quickly to change the way we live, to change and challenge capitalism and colonialism and militarism and all that. The only thing I wanted to contribute to this conversation, which I think was kind of missing, and I think it's important, and that is there's probably about 2 billion farmers and peasants in the world who engage in agricultural work. And if we need to really challenge and go beyond capitalism, I think we need to also think about building alliances between working people and peasants and farmers in the world who will come together and have some kind of a consciousness of the ecological problems that we have and move towards some kind of an ecological sustainable society together. If we can't get the peasants, farmers, and the workers here and in the global south together, I don't think we have much of a chance of overcoming the systems of oppression and the logic of unconstrained logic of capital that appropriates nature and exploits labor. So I think maybe we should address that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have 37 organizations who have co-sponsored this event. We've heard from 15 of them. A number of others have declined to comment or haven't responded. But if there's anyone out there who is with one of the co-sponsoring organizations and would like to say something, please let us know.
Dan, hello. Hello. And at one point you introduced me and I began to give a presentation and then you interrupted me and went on to somebody else.
Oh, sorry.
Also my picture, first they had Don Fitz under my picture.
It now, still says Don Fitz.
Now they have not Don Fitz. Well, I guess that's progress. I'm not, but I mean, you know, it would really be nice to have my name under my picture. Okay.
Well, please tell us your name.
This is William Kreml.
Oh.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Oh. Okay, yeah, because I called on you and we couldn't hear anything, and so I went on. So yeah, I'm glad you came up with it.
Okay, but do you want me to say a word or two?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I enjoyed the presentations. I'm going to say something that's really very different. Throughout the left and throughout the environmental movement and so forth, you have this grassroots notion. Wonderful, nothing wrong with that, but I don't think that's the whole picture. Everybody wants to work from the bottom up. You're going to need both the bottom up and the top down. I have not heard a single speaker use the term antitrust. You have large corporations. We all talk about fighting those corporations. I'm a political scientist. If you go back to the Standard Oil case, you go back to Northern Securities Trusts, the period of Teddy Roosevelt and so forth, you're going to need help from the top also. And the way that you fight these corporations is the way that Teddy Roosevelt and others fought Standard Oil, okay? And the way the banks at certain points under certain administrations were finally confronted. And that can only be done by a powerful federal government that has the ability to stand up to these corporations. It was so sad to have Bill Clinton get up and say, the era of big government is over, just when he jumped into bed with the multinational, huge private corporations. The balance of sectors in our system is outrageous. It's just outrageous. And although all of this ground, whatever you want to call it, earth, I'm stuttering on the word here, but the bottom-up notions are wonderful, but they will never succeed by themselves. And you're going to only succeed with top-down as well as from the bottom up. Our government is incredibly weak. It is incredibly undemocratic. I've taught this for years. I've campaigned. I've run for president. I finished second to Jill Stein in 2016 in the Green primaries. I campaigned all over the country. If we do not have a government that can stand up to the powerful private sector institutions, the banks, the insurance companies, the real estate industry, big food and big pharma, okay? Then we're
Bill,
good.
this is just a reminder, your 2 minutes are up.
Thank you.
So finish your thought.
No, that's, it was perfect.
Okay, thank you. I'm
All
glad
right.
Oh, and look at that. You have my name up. Oh, well,
I think Joe did that. Yeah.
thank you. All right, that was my thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill. And I see Joan, you have your hand up there. Not unmuted yet.
Green Party of Minnesota.
Wait, sorry, okay, Joan, yeah.
I'm
sorry, Mr. Cruz. Let's
I go
hear
ahead?
from Joan. Yeah, yes.
All right, thanks a lot. I'm Broome Tioga Green Party, which is in central New York State. And there's a number of developments there, but also I want to respond to some of the points that were made tonight. And thanks to everybody that's spoken. Capitalism is the enemy, number one. And you've all talked about various aspects of it, and some of them were missed. Look at fracking and what it's doing, particularly in Pennsylvania, where it's destroying the water, where cows are allowed to eat and drink from polluted land and water, where it poisons people. And right now, turbines and solar panels taking up the countryside where it's destroying the land. So there'd be less room to farm. We are facing that right now in the area where we're going to end up with poisoned water and less land for people to grow on. Positive things that are happening in our area, and this is from a group of like Black farmers, a guy called James Minton. He's from Make Farming Black Again. He came up from Georgia up to the north in the cold and the snow, and where he has been developing a farm. And up in Albany, there is a Black Farmers Collective where they are teaching and growing and using sustainable methods to go and produce goods to raise crops and animals. So it's been really, really great. But going back to some of the larger discussions, my family is from Ireland, where we are the oldest colony in the world. If we dwell on history, history is great. The colony and understanding our history understands what happened to us, but it helps us to point out that we need to identify who the enemy is. And the enemy is industrial capitalism. And that is what we need to fight, not by taking over the government, not by being good and finding good corporations to work with, by getting all the workers, the farmers, all of the people who are exploited and oppressed by this system on the basis of their race, their sex, their identity, or their class, and joining together to not just dismantle, but overthrow that system. And think about the wonderful ways, and so many of you are already starting on this, the wonderful ways that we can learn to grow, produce, save our culture, our ecology, our farm, and produce good food for everybody. And that's the way to go in the future, is by not agreeing to go and let good corporations do good things and nice things, but getting rid of them all. The profit motive is bad. It hurts us all, and we need to fight it together. Thank you very much for your time.
Amen, Joan. Mr. Cruz, were you wanting to say something?
Just real briefly, and it kind of came up, but here in Minnesota or Minneapolis, we have one of the best park systems in America, but we're looking to see how should the Greens be advocating for pesticide-free parks. And to hear that people are working on pesticide-free cities is wonderful. So we definitely want to connect. And I kind of want to piggyback off of what Robin Harris said earlier, in that in the 2012 census reported that California has 722 Black farmers. By 2017, that number had decreased to 429. Nationally, there are 45,508 Black farmers, or 1.3% of all farmers, according to the 2017 agriculture census. Their properties account for 0.5% of the country's farmland. And just considering the history of this country, slavery, etc., how can we, as Greens and other allies, make sure that there's more, that those numbers increase and that there's more Black farmers in America?
Absolutely. Okay, I think we've come to the end of this, and I really want to thank all of our 4 wonderful speakers and everybody who commented. I can't disagree with anything anybody said tonight. And I don't know, does Don, do you want to have say anything to finish us off?
I'm muted.
Oh, we had a fabulous moderator. Hey, listen, Stan, have you ever written a book?
Okay, I didn't want to say this, but especially related to what Mr. Cruz said at the end, I also addressed the problem of the dwindling number of Black farmers and their mistreatment by the federal government. In my book that just came out last month, The Path to a Livable Future, put out by City Lights Books. So don't miss it. It's the subtitle is A New Politics to Fight Climate Change, Racism, and the Next Pandemic.
Yay!
Great. And there's some great reviews of that book too.
Yes, yeah, by a guy with the initials DF. A great review. Okay, is that it? Who closes us out here?
Stan Cox closes it out.
Okay, well, I really appreciate everybody who participated. I think this has been a
There's a raised hand.
wonderful. Sorry, it wasn't visible. Please, please speak up.
I don't see it.
Hi,
Yeah.
my name is Anna Schiefelbein, and I'm with the Illinois Green Party. If I can just be a 1 minute.
Well, sorry we missed you.
Oh no, you're fine. I know it's a lot and with Zoom. We actually, in Illinois, we have Saginaw County, which maybe some people here know. Monsanto was the first company town. They had the company town here, and that's how they first started, was in the company town down there, and they did that to make sure that they weren't the environmental regulations that they had back then, that they skipped out on some of them. So sorry to say we are home to that, but unfortunately we are. But we have at ilgp.org/April 2022, we have townships here still in Illinois. So we're doing our annual township meeting. So it's a statewide strategy. And to get the questions on the ballot, we're calling for climate emergency. Some groups are doing the forever chemicals. There's a big town hall coming up next week on that in Central Illinois. And we have a podcast every week, the Illinois Green Party series. And we just had the mayor of Galesburg, who's a Green, and he was talking about the care economy. And we had a beautiful saying, it's everybody's roads, everybody's schools, and really this is everybody's food, so it really puts in perspective, who is us versus them, where it's all of us, and we should all be concerned about that. So that's all I really wanted to say. And if anybody wants to, we have Basecamp, which is a project management software. And so we have some coalitions in there. I know some people here are on it. Just drop me a note at volunteer@ilgp.org. We'll get you going in the coalition. And I like to try to see if we can take this and try to put more grassroots democracy out there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Anna. And I believe that finally closes us out. And apologies for the Zoom bombing, and good night to everybody.
Good night.
And
Night.
thank you very much. Thank you for moderating.
Yes,
Thank
Dan,
Yes, thank
Bye-bye,
you.
my gunshots.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
night.
Thank you.
Night to you.
Hold on one second. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Talking. I guess I'm not talking. Let me leave the thing that's going on.